Yeah. Hello, everybody. Welcome to R&D Unplugged number 7 this year, and we have the distinct pleasure to welcoming Manon Sala. And Manon is a PhD student with the FIRE Doctoral School, and she has a very exciting seminar ahead. Manon, over to you.
Manon. Hello everybody, I am very happy to be here with you all, and thank you Manon and Sarah for inviting me to this 7th R&D Unplugged of the Learning Sciences Institute. Indeed, today I will present one part of my research project, which is on the institutionalization of transitions pedagogies in higher education in France. So we won't go into detail in this matter specifically, but it will be the global framework of the project, really specific on higher education in France. Today's presentation will be divided in 3 main parts. First, I will set up 2 elements of context, more political and ecological context in general. Then I will show you a few elements of methodology to justify a little bit how I can conduct my hypothesis. And finally, 2 elements of guidelines and future perspectives regarding this topic. Concerning the context, I wonder that if you are here today and related to the NPI, that you all know that we are facing a global ecological crisis, but also maybe what we can call a political one. Indeed, I decided to use the planetary boundaries to illustrate it. Here you can see the evolution of the planetary boundaries reached out between 2019 and 2023. Today, there are 7 beyond 9 planetary boundaries that are reached. The current infographic has not been published yet for the 2024, but today from the boundaries that has been reached is the acidification of the ocean. And at the same time, it's like if politics couldn't really react as at the same level, and I have chosen the picture of the COP21 to illustrate it with the need to stay in this safe operating space that is not conducted. And for example, we can speak about the excess of 120% of fossil fuel production comparing to the Paris Agreement in 2020 to illustrate this proposition. And in consequence to that, students in higher education, but also in secondary school in France, decided to commit, to get mobilized with few striking events, such as maybe you heard about it, but the strikes on the street within March 2019, more than 40,000 students on streets asking for more action from politics, but also in education, and also the creation of lots of students' organizations as the collective pour un réveil écologique that you maybe heard about if you are in Paris, if you were in Paris at this time, with this advertising campaign to show the EPCC report to everyone. Also, there were also a lot of graduation ceremony speeches, such as in Polytechnique, HEC, and AgroParisTech, where students were asking for more action in higher education, training to ecological transitions, but also political responsibility to respond to those crises. As a response, there were these reports really specific to higher education, which were published in 2022, which is a rapport Jouzel. So Jouzel is the name of the climatologist who was asking to coordinate different working groups in order to train and to raise awareness to ecological transitions in higher education. And here maybe what we can just present is the notion of that all the undergraduate students must be trained to this topic for 2025. So this is next year, and we can ask ourselves if today the university is really prepared to set up these needs. Also, there is a notion of continuity between the formations, training of students and the society, creating new referentials for green jobs and new systems of accreditation. And it also highlights this necessity of an institutional acculturation. That is to say that all the staff, all the services of the educative institutions must be aware of ecological transitions in terms of training, in terms of organizing the staff valorization, incitation, and also means, resources, financial ones, but also resources in times and in partnerships to develop those aspects of formation, of training. Here, there is an important aspect to underline is the institutive role of public authorities. They highlight for multi-scale partnerships within universities, education institutions, but also within other partners, such as political and economical partners, companies, NGOs, for instance, and they really underpin the necessity of valorization of educators in this way, thanks to resources, training, as I always mentioned. So maybe you're asking yourself that this is the end of the story because everything is settled, implementing these reports, and we don't need much more to think about because it has been prepared by the ministry and officialized, institutionalized a little bit. But if I am doing my research, is that the response is no, and that maybe we have some questions to think about regarding both the report itself, but also the way it is implemented. To respond to this opening question, I will introduce three main hypotheses. The first one we already answered to it is this is the necessity of an institutional support to accompany, to join, to uphold the ecological transitions in education. The second one is that indeed this institutional framework is insufficient to really support this type of acculturation. And the last one will finally respond to our main question, our main thematic of this R&D Unplugged, is that what is the main responsibility, the freedom and the possibility of educators to maybe reverse this lack in terms of institutionalization for more ecological transitions and pedagogies in education. We can maybe sum up this vision with this key research question. Do educators have really the power to build a more caring and sustainable university and society in general? And if I am working in this question, is that I really think that yes, we have the power, but maybe we can go a little bit further and ask ourselves about what are their levers and their strengths to do it. A little bit of methodology. I am working both with qualitative and quantitative methods regarding what we say in social sciences and the inductive, we call it an inductive methodology. That is to say that I spend 1 year and a half in different fields. I will show you my fields after that. And I constructed my hypothesis regarding an iteration process between the literature review, but also semi-directed interviews, participants' observations, and surveys I conducted with a certain amount of respondents. I will show you after that. And that's this is by starting from the field that I could construct this hypothesis, make research questions, and then the attempt of modeling that I will do during my thesis projects. Concerning the fields, indeed, I am working with 3 different partners: Sorbonne University, Paul Valéry Montpellier University in the south of France, and also the LPI with the master team. And what I am doing is that I am really focusing on the role of teachers, educators, in the way they try to adapt the institutional framework and to finally consider it depending on their learning community. Because we see that they are at the intersection between the institutional perspective, but also they have a really big space of freedom with their students, with their academic freedom and freedom of research, to finally think about reimagine the way ecological transitions can be implemented. Always regarding the second hypothesis, I wanted to highlight the notion of TEDs. TED is the main concept that you can remember from the Nouvelle reports. This is how they decided to name ecological transition. So here you can see that this is ecological transition for sustainable development. And we can maybe ask ourselves if the notion of sustainable development is the best terminology to really integrate a global vision of ecology in terms of human sciences, in terms of arts also, but also with the relationship between university and society that include not only science and hard sciences, but also, as I mentioned, arts, NGOs, social issues. So the terminology they are using itself is limited. And this, I didn't tell it myself. This is what I could hear during my interviews with people from the working groups, the working groups, and they also told me, okay, but in French, they use développement soutenable and not développement durable. And even développement soutenable, there is no paper on this. It's come from economy, management, but it's not a terminology that has been fixed by the literature, by projects. So indeed, the global framework is quite weak in terms of structuration, in terms of also references to really construct the strategy. Also, with the notion of TEDs, we totally fall apart the notion of emotions, experiences that are related to ecology, to crisis, to the disruptions we are facing today. And also, it really serves the current cultural framework of modernity that goes with the separation between nature and culture, between the mind and the body, with the famous I think, so I am of Descartes. So it's more a conforming change than a transformative transition, because we stay with in science we use the terminology of epistemology. So here it doesn't rethink the responsibility of science, the way we construct science, the purpose of those texts. And maybe this sentence can really sum up the impact of the text, that human is the living world separated from life because of science and trying to come back to life through science. And I have chosen this sentence of the philosopher of science, because this is the idea of dualism. This is the notion that we separated ourselves from the living world in order to control it, in order to serve a certain type of system. And maybe we can also consider going through another system which is not related to growth, to benefit from the exploitation of planetary resources, from extractivism, productivism. But as I said, this institutional framework doesn't go in this way. And now going to the last and third hypothesis, we can ask ourselves, going to the key research question, how educators can really deal with that. Are they really restrained to this cultural framework, or do they have the possibility to try something new and maybe to implement a new way of thinking our relationships with ecology, with the other living entities. And what I saw after this field work and this 1.5 year research project is that indeed educators can be considered as middle ground creators. This concept comes from studies in management and in geography. And what they do is that they identify a type of communities that finally are quite connected to institutions. They know the rules, they know the norms, they know the system, how it works, the cultural ecosystem, but at the same time, they have a certain amount of freedom that allows them to create projects, to have a certain amount also of impact. They are really impactful because they often have a high level of certification. Also, they have the vocabulary. So they are really at the intersection between different environments, but also level of responsibilities that give them the possibility to think about new ways to position themselves and to act on the system. With having this specific position, they have indeed the power to revert the acculturation process. And this, I also saw it by speaking with the report members, and they indeed explained me that they were really inspired by the place of educators because they were able to know their students, to know their needs. And I put the picture of this Polytechnic graduation ceremony speeches to explain that they could hear them in terms of pedagogy needs, in terms of structural needs in their institutions, and they could be like the whistleblower or the representatives of what they were asking for. And at the same time, as they are parts of the institutional construction, they speak the same language as the different coordinators, not the minister, but the member of the cabinets and of the ministries. And this is really what happens in those different fields. For instance, in Montpellier, my co-directress of research, Angela Bianco-Fiore, she was one of the coordinator of the option in environmental humanities. They began doing this option from scratch with few teachers. They were only 5 at the beginning. They didn't know how to do. They didn't have lots of money. Now there are more than 40 teachers, educators that are working on in this option. And Angela was invited 3 weeks ago to speak in the Ministry of the Ecological Transition in La Défense to show what they do in Montpellier, how do they function, what are their strengths, what are their needs. And they didn't begin with having all the elements to start this option for a more sustainable and caring university. They knew that they had to do something. They knew that this subject was important, was useful for the students, but also from themselves, and they decided to act. And now, 3 years later, they are listened and welcomed by the ministry, in the ministry itself, to influence and to inspire maybe the future trainings in higher education. Also, I can mention the Sorbonne University example, where it started with 2 teachers in chemistry that they wanted to reconsider the responsibility of the chemists regarding green chemistry, responsibility in production, etc. And they created an event with also from scratch with really few resources and no lots of publicity and within the institution. And today they could have money from lots of fundings to create a wider project between years to implement it between different departments of Sorbonne. So here it was few examples, maybe to give you hope that we can do something, and even if you don't know where to go And what would be the final results? That finally it's a matter of time, motivation, but also you as educators, you have this knowledge both of the students, the underground perspective, but also of the system itself, to be able to reverse what you consider is not okay, is not enough, and if you want to do more. Okay. Maybe to end it, the few key takeaways that you can bring with you is that, of course, education is really related to the key issues and societal challenges. As educators, you have this possibility, as already mentioned, to know how to act, even if you don't know from where to start. Because you speak the same institutional language and you have the power to influence it. And now maybe the question you can ask yourself is that if you are ready to hack the system in the way you want, it can be as the students did with mobilization, like being a really counterpower, more striking and learning, or as an educator in a more soft way, by doing your research. And maybe here the most important thing to consider is the importance to really collaborate between institutions, between educators, and not to stay alone with your ideas and your needs. So thank you for your attention, and I will be very happy to respond to questions if you have it.
Questions for Manon?
Yes.
Go ahead. Okay, well, first, thank you again for this starting talk and very positive in the saying that it makes us want to act and feel like we could. As a starting point, I think I'm more pessimistic, and I would like to question some of the way you work on it. For instance, in the takeaway messages, it seems to me that you focused on things that worked, for instance, at Sorbonne or Paul Valéry University in Montpellier. But did you also study examples where it did not work? And that might be a good complement to understand why in some occasions it works and what are the conditions to actually reverse these dynamics.
Yes. Indeed, when I chose those fields, I didn't know if it would have worked that way. It was 1 year ago, and at this time, Sorbonne University didn't have fundings yet, and also Angela was not invited yet to the ministry. It was quite a crisis indeed in this option. So I have chosen the field depending on the opportunities, and also doing other field work in other schools, for instance, in business school. And finally, why I have chosen them is because they are in public education. I really want to focus in public university in France. And for instance, the case of the LPI, for instance, I don't know if I didn't see, because maybe I am in this field for a shorter amount of time, but I don't know yet if there is this influence on institutions, because I am really focusing on at a meso level. Within the master team, we are conducting a research project on the impact of the master for the students in terms of competencies regarding the transitions. So here I was very, very lucky that 2 fields were successful, but it was not my will to choose those fields in particular because they were like this. And also, I didn't mention it because I didn't want to push too much on this, but this field is about more in there is no the desire to go into an institutionalization, because it's more really a short-term inverse, like as summer schools, colloquium, symposiums. And here, for me, it would be a way to compare how the change is implemented. Is it if it's really from the institution itself, or if those little places of creation, of research, can also be parts of this institutionalization of ecological transition. So I don't know if it answers.
Yeah, did you want to elaborate?
No, exactly. So first of all, learning planting is actually a demonstration of failure.
Okay.
Okay? To explain to you why it is a failure. If it was successful, it will still be part of Université de Paris. It's not. It's had to be an independent association, and it's now moving towards being a completely independent organization. Now that means that in terms of managing to do, managing to make the transition within the town or whichever institution it was, and you can actually identify what was going on in the institutional level that blocked it and the poison of the money from. You can put in a lot of things why the failure is there, but in terms of pure changing to a university, it didn't. It ended up outside. Okay, so that's a really interesting example that you have within your collection.
The master, so I
know what changed in the university. When you look, I'll tell you why it is. Just a minute, let me finish and tell you why it's because when we were looking around in Université de Paris, for anyone doing citizen science, nothing. Crickets, like in the open science, they're doing the open access, they're doing the open data, talk with them about public participation, nothing. And same things in other aspects. When we talked with Pierre, who was running their a course about it called biodiversity thing. Also, one example, end of the year, it disappeared. So there's something going on.
I'm not countering the results, it's just the premise.
Okay.
Because I won't categorize things as failure or success. I'll take a photograph of the current situation. The master's degree is a Université Paris master's degree. It is not a Learning Planet Institute master's degree. It is housed here, but it's the University of Paris. So on the spectrum here, we should have Paul Valéry, Sorbonne Université, and UPCT, and not Learning Planet Institute. It's a University of Paris master's degree. Now, what's interesting is currently the university doesn't know where to house that master's degree. It doesn't know what department it should be attached to.
Exactly.
That reflects institutional failure.
Yes.
It's not learning, for me, it's not Learning Planet Institute.
That's what I mean by failure. Like if you think about it, if you would start as a successful, look at the other example. The other examples, you had two people in the institution starting an initiative, and then it's become, as you described, 40 people.
Yes.
Okay? 3 started at Université Paris. If it was a successful initiative, it would still be part of the university, and it would be a really strong department. Now, there was enough institutional systems to actually take this thing institutionally, and the entity is strong enough to say, you know what, we're doing fine now, and really successfully. So I would say, but living kind of those things, I agree that we need to look also at habits of failures. So people who try to run a course and then they have support from the institution, or other things like that. I'm partly here. Also, I tried to run an MSc in citizen science at UCL.
I would add
Then it's work.
the porosity as well. I'd look at the porousness. Because I think that's the success, even if we can identify successes, I wonder how porous they are, whether they're just not isolated, working inside. And how, I find what's interesting as well would be to look at a university that has no technical science department. That's purely social sciences and let's say and humanities, because there's no law that for the TEDs, right? From what I understand, the TEDs still haven't been integrated into the Code de l'Éducation. So for the moment, it's still just the circular. There's no legal obligation.
Yes.
And what the circular says, that students need to be made aware. I think the French term is sensibilisation. They need to be made aware of issues surrounding environmental issues to be able to graduate from
Yes.
there. I don't know what that means.
It's really big, but I think they are really working in heads, marché sur des œufs, because as the educators have the academic freedoms, they cannot ask them create mandate regulatory framework. It doesn't exist, so it's only incitative. And they are really blocked, and even in the rapport groups, they were not all speaking the same language. They were asking for more social sciences, for creating a GIS to really follow the implementation of the report. But some teachers who were part of the rapport said that they already knew what to do and they didn't need the help of the research team. So it's also about human from positions and decisions. It's really subjective. And as there is no this regulatory framework, it's really
I think it's a great subject area. It's really interesting. The Code de l'Éducation preserves the academic freedom of faculty. But you can render obligatory certain training programs. They've done it in the past, right? They've introduced the obligation for students, undergraduate students, to follow a second modern language course. There's the obligation to follow, no matter what undergraduate degree you're studying, you have to do a computing course. So they've done it in the past. There's absolutely no reason why they can't introduce into law the obligation to have a course on environmental science. Again, the law is written by human beings, like the people in this room. So,
and in higher, are you talking about higher education? Okay, I didn't know that they could really oblige to include these types of
it's interesting in one of your slides. You have the word counterpower.
Yes.
And I was wondering what power constitute a real counterpower. I was wondering what power we were countering.
It's more social power, but it's not about law. It's not about it's more soft power than hard power here. It's more about influencing a short-term perspective with, but not really restructuring the way higher education is working. It's more opening the way, for instance, with supporting through events, conventions, but it does not oblige. It's only soft power. Because I think in the ministries, there is also this political issue of how the minister wants to be seen. And when Frédérique Vidal saw thousands of students on the streets, she said, okay, now it's the time, but also because she was interested by this topic. And now with the change of the government, what we see is that the new minister, this is not her priority. So they are only ending the scoping notes, but they don't know how it will evolve for them in the last few years.
Yeah.
Recently at the LPI forum, we understood that there were going to be grants given by the LPI, right? And this comes from the Ministry of Education. So I think that's an interesting kind of institutional transformation that is maybe a sign of the recognition directly from the ministry about what the LPI is doing in terms of kind of transforming education, learning transition towards the sustainable development. So it might be interesting. We are seeing the LPI in itself to be studied in terms of it becoming a United Nations university and also getting the card from the ministry. It is showing an institutional kind of backup from a different level. So
which
I don't know, just adding that.
What is it about? What does it grade?
Well, we were
Maybe we'll leave it for
Okay.
offline, because
Okay.
we're still in the.
Okay.
I actually have a question.
Yeah, sorry.
So this is about the terminology you mentioned at the beginning, that TEDS, so Transition écologique pour un développement soutenable, is too restricted and doesn't, might not, like, if we do take it as a very like strict semantic sense of these words, some people might not think it would include things like are still important for what we want to accomplish, like equality, justice, peace. And do you feel like using this term is actually limiting the diplomatic implementation in itself, or are people able to get past it? And if it does limit it, then have you found other terms? Because in French it's kind of hard, and even in English, because I've tried to find something, but something like transitions doesn't point to this. It points to like the other types of transitions. And it's hard to find a term.
Yeah, it's really difficult, and I think there are different schools. For instance, UVED, they are speaking about education through anthropocene. So it's another way to consider those phenomena, those challenges, is like if every learning community had its own vocabulary. And finally, one big picture is that we are speaking about the same thing, but with different words. And of course, it would be really useful to have the same label to speak about it. Here, sustainable development, it's also inspired by the SDGs. Indeed, the ONU framework is really helpful for every levels of educative organizations. So I like the terminology of global ecology because I think that it includes the questioning the cultural aspects of ecology, the more sensitive, experiential ones. But if you go to an institutional environment, I think it really depends. Every institution will have its terminology. And but when I speak with educators, they use TED, but they don't know what it's about. So it's about using the terms, but also knowing really what is it. And here the ministry is not really helpful because it doesn't really stand for a clear definition. So for me, it's more a political decision to really respond to the context, the mobilization context, but in terms of follow-up, of help in terms of resources, valorization, etc. Even if it's mentioned, in real life, it doesn't happen like that. And even it can be really bad for educators and academics to work on this topic because it's not valued by their peers, by the reviews. They want to write in the best reviews are not about TED and transition pedagogies. So when also I speak with partners, for instance, on the computer transition, they tell me, okay, finally we are resistant, and we also accept that maybe our career as researchers, academics will be a little bit in danger because of these needs, because it doesn't fit into the system of the academic career. So here is a really one-to-one decision to accept the risks, but also there is a good signal that in the CNU, the national categorization of, I don't know how to translate, but the number, the code that certified teachers, there is now a new number, a new category on the pedagogy of transition. So maybe it can find it's a little bit general, but it can be, for me as a researcher, for me it's an open door, maybe for my future career. But if you're not in pedagogy, I don't know if you can fit in this box.
Go ahead, this time. Maybe I think it should, for all the questions, it would have been helpful, and maybe you can elaborate on in the takeaway messages. There are many terms which are ambiguous. We mentioned power, for instance. What do we mean by that? What would it be to reverse structural dynamics and constraints? That kind of things. I don't know if you've written about them, maybe in a more elaborated way, but if you could yeah, roughly tell us a bit what exactly you're talking about and how you write it. Maybe it will help us understand what we're talking about.
Okay. Yes, indeed, here it was more a general presentation. I didn't want to go really into detail. But when we speak about acculturation, this is a word that was used by the ministry itself in September 2024 in its last scoping notes. And what they say, it was about the training the educators. And what they say is that educators has to mobilize in order to rethink the responsibility of their research, so to train themselves, but also they have to influence their courses in those topics. So they have to reconsider all the objectives, the purposes of their classes, and the way they also organize their working time. But in reality, they don't have teachers and educators don't have much more time to train themselves, to create new courses. They suggest to train themselves for 10 hours or to take more time, but they don't really create the environment to do it. They also ask for a staff mobilization. So all the pedagogical engineers, but also all the staff, the administrative staff, or the, I don't know, but everyone should be trained to this. So there could be massive trainings for all the staff in organizations. They also say that different partnerships in terms of internships, but also apprenticeship could be reorganized around the transitions. Also the projects, events and les plans quinquennaux d'établissement, that it would be the guideline of all the decisions. So this is what they talk about when they speak about acculturation. It's a 4 pages scoping notes, so it's to say many general and structural things. They only write 4 pages with really few recommendations. So when I speak about reversing this, is really implementing the acculturation that is asked, but by the teachers, with using the environments that already exist. And I could identify few of them, like the learning space, the classroom, because here they are with the students and it doesn't ask them more time because it exists. But it also goes back to the origins, that if they are not trained and if they are not also pedagogically speaking used to it, it's really complicated. So
I don't get in your example, maybe you can clarify how does it relate to reverse the constraints? What I heard is more they do, despite the constraints, they still do whatever they can. But how does that change the institution, for instance? If as an educator myself, I decide, for instance, to teach my students about climate change or things like that, even though it's not the topic of my courses, that's a personal choice. But
yes,
what would be, in my example, reversing dynamics?
Yes. For instance, you have to elect president of the university. I don't know, it'll be 5 years maybe. And here the presidents will try to have some votes. And if there is a coordination of different teams, departments that really stand for more ecology, social transitions in their university, if they are able to organize themselves, it will influence the president's elections. And finally, all the structural decisions that will be made by this person. So that's why here is more about collaboration between departments to create this counter power, because at one point it will be included in the decision-making process. Well, either it is for the election of the president, but also for other departments, elections, votes, where the decisions are made at different middle level that can influence the macro perspective at the institutional scale. And then the ministries, what they do is that they are, there is a tutelage exercise in France. So every minister every institution is connected to a specific minister. And they are those places of discussion with presidents about what are your needs, what are the future projects. And here there are some spaces where, if, for instance, this is what they do in la conférence des grandes écoles or France Université, where they gather all the presidents of the French universities, grandes écoles, and they are really aware about what is happening at every institution's level to try to implement it in their recommendations. So this is really a dialogue that takes time, and sometimes there are a lot of failures, and sometimes it succeeds.
Okay, and then
So, question.
Go ahead.
So, question about your chemists.
Yes.
They report on any resistance, either from colleagues or from saying we need to produce people for the industry, and that's really like something like that.
I think the first resistance is from the students, because here what she realized in particular, this researcher, is that finally the options that she created at the beginning didn't really appeal a lot of students, because it was really on the merge of what they want to do next, because most of them want to go to the industry, and their career opportunities are more about that. So she tried to adapt her intuition about necessity of integrating care, because she's more working on care, with the link with chemistry. And for instance, she decided to create collaboration with another chemist, which is in the University of Lyon. And this chemist is working on the political and economical origins of materials in the periodic boards. You know, you have the periodic boards in chemistry, and you are speaking about particles, but you don't know where these particles come from. And most of the time, they come from the extraction of really rare materials in, I don't know, in Latin America. So it's related to socio-economical, it's really systemic challenges. So she tried to, after 1 year, maybe or two of experimenting something that were not really successful, she tried to identify by asking the students, by speaking with them, that what will be really talkative to them. And so she really adapted her option. And I think she had a lot of support from her team at the department level. For instance, the master representative was really helpful. And then when it was at a higher macro level, asking for funding from Sorbonne University, she of course faced lots of limits and constraints. But now she really, it was really an engineering project, and she tried to speak the same language. That's why I will speak about that. So. And it works finally. She has found for, I think, 3 years, and she also looks longer in the future. So it's really little by little. Also having the support of other researchers working on that, it helps a lot. Here the main aspect is collaboration. Because when as a researcher, you come with books from Oxford University, Stanford, which are working on care, you know that they are real backgrounds on these topics. Yes.
And thank you for your presentation. I'm just going back to the human level of this transformative change, because I think there are also people behind the change. And as you mentioned before, we need time and motivation to just do all this change. And I was wondering whether, what was the profile of people, of educators doing this kind of change? Are they in-house, or maybe people with kind of collaboration?
I think what I saw working with different initiatives is that the change can come. The common ground is that there are people that are really convinced by what they are talking about, Most of the time, it's people that are not afraid about their career perspective because they are already in a permanent job, and or for instance, they agree with the fact that they don't want to become a professor, the highest level in the university. But the change can indeed come from a pedagogical engineer. For instance, in Rennes, they created a global convention in their university where they are asking about the different aspects, elements of the university. It's really systemic. So they are here doing a convention to change all the aspects of campus, student life, research, and training. And the change came from a pedagogical engineer that was really convinced and that worked with the vice president on transition. They did la CEC, la Convention des entreprises pour le climat. So it didn't come from a teacher, but thanks to this engineer, pedagogical engineer, they could really take all the teachers, all the educators, and all the institution itself to this global change. And so I think the main aspect is that motivation and also finding allies, complicites in your institutions, and also people who finally it's even if they don't know the result yet, the necessity to act, to respond to it is higher than the risk they take by doing this. But here in this case, it was a man. In the case of Sorbonne and Montpellier, there are two women leading the project. In the case of the LPI, indeed, I am working since really less time in this field, so I cannot really stand for really big ideas yet. But what I see is that I am working with the teacher team, the pedagogical engineer, and they do what they can at their scale, but they don't have the final power to go to scale up, because they have only the control on their pedagogical device and la maquette, the organization of the classroom. So they try to do their best with their limits. But I am sure they can speak maybe with Raphael and they can go a little bit beyond, but I don't know yet. I don't have worked with these fields.
Yeah, that could be interesting to just
Yes.
recreate a configuration, which doesn't seem to be a big deal in other kind of universities. See if this huge role also.
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. It's about right. So we can thank Manon. We stop the recording at this moment. I just want to tell you about our next session, R&D Unplugged, the last session of the year. It's going to take place on December 12th at 11 o'clock. And we have Serge Stinkwich from United Nations University, Macau. He's flying all the way to do the seminar. Almost. Please consider attending. It's going to be very exciting. It's going to talk about AI and SDGs. Thank you again, Manon.
Thank you. Thank you.